We'll be discussing the latest on Deebo Samuel on today's Jack Hammer Show. Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Jack Hammer from the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Hope you're all doing well. As you know, normally on Monday I go live with Rob Shue for the Sneakerheads. We're going to have to push that back a little bit this week. That'll be coming up on Wednesday. Let's go take a look really quick. The topics for today, we're going to discuss Deebo Samuel. We're going to discuss a little bit about Trey Lance, and then also the 49ers making another addition to the wide receiver room. Let's go ahead and let's get started with the latest on Deebo Samuel. But real quick, before I get started on the Deebo Samuel thing, I hope you all saw the new intro and like that. That's actually Jesse Naylor, my co-host on Thursday night with the Hammer and Nail Show. He put that together for me over the weekend, and really excited to debut that and show everybody what his magic that he was able to spin on Saturday really quick for me. Some really cool stuff. So really hope you enjoyed that. And like I said, it's kind of the cool thing for me is I'm a throwback. I've been following the team for over 40 years. So to be able to combine the greatness of the 80s with the current team, couldn't think of a better way to do that to open up the show. So big thanks to Jesse for doing that. But as far as the latest on Deebo Samuel, what I wanted to start off with was the comments that the information that was shared by Peter King earlier today. He was talking about how the 49ers might be in a quandary if Deebo Samuel insists on getting paid towards the top of the market. And then he goes into talking about how his average receiving over the last 2 years and comparing that to other wide receivers. I completely disagree with this. And going this, I think this is a completely disingenuous way of looking at what Deebo Samuel brings to the 49ers. Looking at just his past 2 years, when you look at the last 2 years, 55 catches for 898 yards, comparing that to Stephon Diggs, who has 115 catches for 1,380 yards on average. A couple of things just jump out off the page of that. Those are averages, right? So with less than half of the catches of Stephon Diggs over the last 2 years, Deebo Samuel is less than 500 yards behind him, and that's despite having. I mean, the numbers don't even really make sense when you really start to look at it. Deebo Samuel with 55 catches for 898 yards. Obviously, that's partly because of the injuries that he suffered that knocked him out of the season for most of 2020. We know that injuries are a concern with Samuel, but that just, I saw that earlier today, and it just kind of blew my mind that a sports writer would go to that length to really discredit a receiver who, if you look at Deebo Samuel and the numbers that he's put up across his first 3 seasons with the 49ers, it's not even close. Deebo Samuel in his first year, the only person as a 49er who put together a better rookie season than Deebo Samuel was Jerry Rice. Samuel had more receptions, but just a few, I think it was about 100 yards less. And then you look at what he did in 2021, and he was on pace to be, through 7 weeks, he was actually ahead of Jerry Rice's pace. And then things slowed down when they started to utilize him more as a running back. So it's just really something to see somebody work so hard to discredit a player. Now, as he get in, and like I said today on Twitter, if he's getting that information from the 49ers, and we know that Peter King has a pipeline to the 49ers, having been in their draft room, I believe the first year of the Shanahan Lynch regime. If that's what he's hearing, and it's not just his opinion, that doesn't bode well for the 49ers. And really, if I was Deebo Samuel and that's the kind of stuff I was hearing in negotiations, I don't blame him for. Sorry about that. It just doesn't make any sense to go ahead and um, try to spin it in that way. Um, Sorry about the issue with the sound. The other thing too, when you're looking at this Deebo Samuel negotiation, another thing that I heard, or I've heard a couple of times now in recent days, was the contract signed by Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, and how there's just not enough money to pay all these guys. And I think it's important to really take a step back and look at that situation. Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers is going to make $28 million next year against the cap, 31 the year after that. Out in Kansas City, Tyreek Hill, they had to move him because Patrick Mahomes has a cap hit of $35 million this year, and I believe it's 41 next year. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, their expected starting quarterback has a cap hit of around $28 million for the next 3 years combined. So as I kind of mentioned on Saturday when I did my stream on Samuel specifically around his contract, what I will say on this is the time, if you want to go all in with a guy like Deebo Samuel and guys like Nick Bosa, this is the time to do it. You have a quarterback that's going to be taking up a minimal amount of cap space. Deebo Samuel probably has 4 or 5 good seasons left in him at the way that he plays, right? He might have more, but those are going to be his prime years, are going to be the next 4 to 5 years. Lock him down. Use that cap savings that you're getting by having Trey Lance on his rookie deal for Deebo Samuel, and you could do the same thing with Nick Bosa to an extent. The salary cap's going to be jumping really, supposed to jump at a pretty high rate here in 2024. They can do it if they just get creative and make this work. So that's where we are real quick on Deebo Samuel. Real quick, before I move on to my next part of the discussion on Samuel, I just want to shout out a couple of folks. E. Kim, how you doing? He says, hey, Jack, good to see you. Bomber One, good afternoon, Jack. Good afternoon, good to have you on. Raphael 562, hello, Jack and everyone. Raphael's always around, so good to see him. And then Victory Street Ministry, Hammer Time. That's right. Monday, get this week rolling. The second one, and you might disagree with me a little bit. The other thing that I wanted to say was, I'm going to just speak really quick to a tweet that I sent out today. And it was, I've been watching the 49ers for about 42 years that I can remember. They've always been around, my family and everything. But that for about, let's say, go back to 1980. From 1980 on, I have a pretty good feeling for the 49ers. And Deebo Samuel is the second best wide receiver that I've seen play for the 49ers since that time. And yes, I understand that Terrell Owens is in the Hall of Fame. Deebo Samuel is on pace to be better than Terrell Owens. Just take a step back. Terrell Owens in his career has 2 seasons of over 1,400 yards. Those were both with the 49ers. One of those came in 2001. The second one came in 2000, or excuse me, those that were backwards. 2000, 2001. Jeff Garcia was the quarterback at that time. It took 146 targets for Owens to get to that number the first year in 2000. It took 155 targets for him to get to that number the second year. This season, in only his third year in the NFL, Deebo Samuel went over 1,400 yards, and it took him only 122 targets to get there. Here's the thing. When it comes to Deebo Samuel, we know that he makes the plays. He was on pace to be over 1,800 yards this last year if they just kept him at running back or at wide receiver and not just started using him as a running back and started to. The thing with Samuel that they're doing, and the reason why you saw his targets drop was because they were trying to minimize his touches. They're trying to keep him to somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 9 touches a game. Makes sense. So that's why the more he ran the ball, the fewer passes he was getting coming his way, because they were trying to minimize the amount of hits that he was receiving. If you compare the numbers of Samuel and Terrell Owens over their first 3 seasons, Deebo Samuel has more yards receiving than Terrell Owens did in those first 3 years, and he's done that despite having fewer targets. One of them is at 262 for Terrell Owens, and it's around 240 something for Deebo Samuel, right in that ballpark. So Deebo Samuel is on pace to be an amazing receiver for the 49ers. We'll see where this plays out and if he stays with the team for the next 5 years. Kim says, Jack, I don't want to see Deebo traded, but it's this front office that always is slow to react in the modern goings on in the league. Well, I don't know if they're slow to react. The 49ers typically get these big deal signings done towards the latter part of the offseason. So we're looking at a July to August July time frame, right before training camp starts. Training camp is supposed to start at the end of July, so that's around the time you would expect to see a Deebo Samuel thing get done. The other piece that's important to remember here with Deebo Samuel is that he's pretty much all of the top receivers that are coming up for renewals this year that were from his draft class have the same representation. So Samuel is in the position where I think he's trying to also make sure that he's setting the market correctly, and his representation is as well. So I just think that's part of what we're seeing taking place here with the 49ers and Deebo Samuel. I think that if it doesn't get done and they end up trading him, that's a big time mistake for the 49ers. That's for sure. Let's see what else we have going on in the comment section. Lee says last couple wide receiver classes were pretty good. Maybe teams start moneyballing wide receivers and trade or not sign a second contract if this is a new normal for wide receiver contracts. Wide receivers at the top end have always been pretty well paid. I think the money that we're seeing be spent on them right now is indicative of the way that the cap is going, and teams realize this, and players realize this, and the teams are having to adjust to it. And we're going to see that as well when we see Nick Bosa's deal come down. And then Harold says the 49ers should not overpay. I don't think that I don't think that the 49ers would be overpaying if they added 4 years of $120 million like Tyreek Hill. I don't think the 49ers would be overpaying if they gave him that deal. Not for what Deebo Samuel brings to the team. Deebo Samuel, there's nobody on the 49ers that can do what Deebo Samuel does. There's a reason why guys like Mike McDaniel during the offseason were talking about how the rage around the league now is to try to find a Deebo Samuel. That's that in the draft. That's you watch these draft shows, you watch during the combine, during the scouting combine, one of the things that you heard quite a bit was how teams were looking to find the next Deebo Samuel out of their wide receiver group. And I think that it's odd that we're now finding the 49ers in a position where there are some 49er fans who feel like Deebo Samuel isn't worth the money. I feel like the 49ers already have the guy that everybody else in the league is trying to find. So you sign him and you bring him back. Because there's like Victory Ministries says, that's a good point. Not only is there nobody on the 49ers that can do what Deebo Samuel does, there's nobody in the league. That's why they're all trying to find him. So, you say it's incredible to not see the front office take full advantage of rookie quarterback deals and load up. Again, earlier in this offseason, I made a comment about how the 49ers, the $25 million that the 49ers don't have on the salary cap isn't hampering the deals that they're going to do for like Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa. And the reason that I said that is because that $25 million this year isn't going to count towards all of, their contracts. Maybe this is what they do. Maybe they get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. I've said all along, I don't feel like Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be on the team. Shouldn't say all along because it hasn't been all along, but I've said in over the last month that I don't think that Jimmy Garoppolo is actually going to be here. I think the 49ers will end up moving on from him. Maybe what you see the 49ers do is give Deebo Samuel $50 to $70 million, depending on how long they want to put his guaranteed money, whether they want his fully guaranteed portion of his contract to be 2 to 3 years. That's why there's such a range. It's between 2 or 3 years. Maybe they front load it a little bit so that Deebo Samuel's, they use that 25. Maybe they use 10, 15 million of that 25 to maybe front load a little bit of a deal for a Deebo Samuel so that they can then drop his cap hit next year or something like that when a Nick Bosa contract extension comes on. And this the way to think about this is that again, Trey Lance is only going to cost you $28 million against the cap for the next 3 years. You could have him for the fourth year, which is his fifth year option. It would be more expensive, but it's still going to be probably around $28 million that 1 year when you start to just kind of calculate out, because right now it's 18, so you figure it's going to go up by a certain percentage. Usually that number jumps up on the fifth year option. So even if it's 28 the last year of it, by the time 4 years from now comes along, the salary cap is going to be pretty high, and the 49ers will have some wiggle room to work around that. So let's see what else we've got. Because there's another one. Robert says, good evening, Jack. There's no one in the NFL that can bring what Deebo brings to the table. And I agree. I agree with you there. E. Kim again says, Jack, I understand that Jimmy's contract has no impact on Bosa and Deebo's future deals, but this team has needed defensive players who can get more takeaways. Okay. Let's take a look at that one just a little bit. And I think that this is an important piece of the discussion when we talk about the 49ers and what they can do. As far as the team that they have already. The 49ers, I know that last year they had a pretty good pass rush, but they weren't getting the turnovers, the interceptions and those things. And I feel like a big reason that they weren't getting those interceptions is because they didn't have the players on the back end. They had Ambry Thomas on one side, and he's a rookie, and they had Manu Mosley's pretty good on the other side, but you have guys they're having to play soft coverage because they're afraid of getting beat deep. They're kind of having to help out with Ambry Thomas a little bit. I think when you add in a guy like Charvarius Ward by himself, I think is going to help with the turnovers that you're talking about and getting more takeaways, because now you have a guy who specializes in man coverage, who can play tight. And if the pass rush is getting home and doing what they're supposed to do, and the defense isn't having to play off quite as much, I think you're going to get some of those turnovers coming. You're going to get some turnovers. You're going to get, if you have tighter coverage, you're going to get the quarterback getting hit a little bit more often, which could lead to turnovers on fumbles and those types of things. So I feel like they're in a pretty good spot here. I really do. I think they're going to be better than last year in terms of the takeaway department. I think the defense could be stronger all around, especially in the passing game. I'm not sure about their run defense. The loss of DJ Jones hurts with that. The Tyreek Hill, I don't know why you see two different guaranteed figures for Tyreek Hill. If you look at his numbers, at least according to over the cap, Tyreek Hill is at $52.5 million as his guaranteed money. He has $52.5 million guaranteed. Pretty close to that number. I think it was 25.5 of that as signing bonus, and then the other part of that guarantee is his contract in 2022 and 2023, the base pay, and then he has a pretty big roster bonus that gets paid for 2023 as well. That's why I say give Deebo Samuel $52 million, or if you want to look at doing it 3 years, I think that's where you have to get into the 70s. But we'll see how that all plays out. And then Mr. G says, are the 49ers afraid of finding themselves in another D Ford situation? They could be. That could be part of it. I think it's just a little bit different. It's a little bit different scenario in that D Ford was a chronic back issue that they just couldn't work around. With Deebo Samuel, it's pretty much been muscle strains and things like that. I think we saw that happen last year against Minnesota when he tweaked it. He knows his body though, so that's why he was able to minimize the amount of injury. So we'll see how that works out. But I think that Deebo is definitely worth the money to get there. Let's see. So let's move on. Let's move off of this one. I want to talk a little bit about Trey Lance, because that was the If you look at the picture that I put with this show for today, it was about Trey Lance working out with teammates, and that's fantastic. He's down in Southern California working with. Uh, he was throwing balls out there to Brandon Ayuk, and uh, Juwan Jennings was out there, Ray McLeod, and then Connor Weddington off of the practice squad was there as well. Good to see that happening. Good to see Trey Lance working with his teammates, getting those reps in right now, for all those guys to get out there and be working. It's could pay off and be huge dividends for the 49ers as they go down the road. Uh, I believe that this is going to be Trey Lance's job to lose. And I don't see him losing it. I believe that the 49ers plan on this being Trey Lance's team this year, and it's just a matter of time before they move on from Garoppolo this offseason. One way or another, he's going to get traded at some point, I believe. So good to see Trey Lance though down there working with those guys. In the past, Jimmy Garoppolo has done that with the receivers. I know he did that out in Nashville I think it was last year. Or 2 years ago, he'd worked out with them in San Jose at one point. But it's good to see Trey Lance getting the reps in with those guys and just getting ready for the season. I'm looking forward to seeing what Lance can bring to the table here in 2022. And I think the biggest thing with Lance that we're going to see is he's going to open up. Again, this kind of ties into Deebo Samuel. I think when you get Trey Lance into the game this season, you're going to see the offense open up. Part of the whole reason why you saw Deebo Samuel have to be used in the backfield last year was because the 49ers run game, they just weren't an explosive offense. And the fastest way to get explosive plays was really to get the ball in Deebo Samuel's hands. There's only so many ways you can throw screen passes. You can scheme up some more things out of the running game that way. I just feel like with Trey Lance in there at quarterback, you're going to see Deebo Samuel take advantage of the ball going down the field a little more often. We already saw it a little bit last year at the end of the season against Houston with the deep ball down the middle. In the two games that they played together last year, Deebo Samuel averaged, I believe it was about 19.5 yards per reception if we go back and look at those from a season ago. So those are good numbers. He didn't get very many receptions. I think in the two games combined, he had 3 in one game. In the other, he had 3 as well. But yeah, against Arizona, 19.3 yards per reception. Against Houston, it was 21 yards per reception. So explosive plays for Deebo Samuel there, and that also plays into when we take a look at his when it comes back going back talking about Trey Lance, but now going back to Deebo Samuel. When you hear about Deebo and injuries and things like that, if he's running down the field more often, he's going to get fewer hits, and that's a big key there as well. So, and yes, Lee asked if didn't Deebo hurt his foot in one of those get together workouts, and yeah, it was out in Nashville in 2020. Swan helps him out with that one. So good though to see Trey Lance. I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings to the table. Like I said, I feel like we're going to see a more explosive passing offense than we've seen in years past. Those screens and underneath stuff will still be there every once in a while, but I think you're going to be able to see a guy who's going to be able to take advantage of throws down the field. Yeah, and here's a good one right here. Mr. G says, when you did your film breakdown of Trey last year, seems like his eyes are always going to the right place. He's got to trust his instincts, and that's 100% accurate. And that's one of the things that we saw of him last year against Houston. If you go back and you watch that game, there was a couple of plays early on where there were receivers that were open, and Lance looked at them, and then it didn't seem like he trusted what he was seeing, and pulled the ball down and moved. One of them was early in the game. It was the first pass of the game. He had Ayuk, I believe it was, on a deep curl to his left side, and he just didn't trust it. Pulled his arms down and took off running, scrambling to his left, and didn't get the first down. The second one was later when they were backed up, and they're running a quick slant, and he had a couple of guys open over there, and again just didn't trust his eyes to pull the trigger, and then took off moving to his right, and he ended up completing a pass. I believe it was to Ayuk on the move for a nice game, but that could have been a bigger play if he had just thrown the ball in rhythm. So I agree. I think as he gets going and he begins to trust his instincts and he begins to trust what he's seen, and Kyle Shanahan is starting to trust that Lance has seen what he's supposed to see, that's when you're going to see this offense really take off together. And then last but not least, moving on, the 49ers did not. Oh, hey, real quick before we jump on. Hey, look at that. We got Gav in the house. Let's go, Hammerheads. Hey, Gav, good to see you out here from all the way from Wales. I hope you liked my World, the 49ers According to Jack tweet this morning. If you saw it, I don't know if you liked it or not, but that was one. I actually was thinking about you shortly after I sent that out. But the other topic that I wanted to hit on just real quick was the 49ers made another addition to the roster. They went out and added wide receiver Malik Turner. Turner spent last year with the Dallas Cowboys. Actually, the last 2 years, he was with the Cowboys in 21 and 22, or 20 and 21, 21, excuse me. 2018 and 2019, he was a member of the Seattle Seahawks. He actually put up some pretty good receiving numbers. Last year with the Cowboys, had 3 touchdowns. Those 3 touchdowns last year would have made him put him, I believe, third on the 49ers receivers. Actually, it would have been fourth because he would have been right there, though. It would have been Deebo Samuel had 6, Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings each had 5, and then all the other 49ers receivers had 1. He would have been 5th on the 49ers last year in touchdown receptions with 3. So, the interesting piece about Turner, he's a big guy, 6'2", 200 pounds. 49ers seem to like that. He's played a lot of special teams over the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, he's played 500 combined special team snaps, 505 in his career. He only played 5 the first year, but starting in 19 and 21, he played 170 and 19. He played 238 last year. He was injured, only played 6 games in 2020, so he had 92 there. But as far as his percentages of his snaps in those games that he played, it was 39, 49, and 59. So definitely growing. The role that I could see here is, this is like kind of another Trent Sherfield kind of a shot in the dark. Get him in here to help with your coverage units, help him on special teams, but also be able to fill in and make some plays in the receiving game. He's not a bad receiver, does a pretty good job, like I said. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. Let's just take a look at, like I said, he was 240. His best receiving yardage was actually was in 2019 when he had 15 catches for 245. Also had of that 245, 101 of it was yards after the catch, and last year it was 74 of his 149 yards were out of yak. It's interesting. This guy Malik Turner, and then Marcus Johnson, who the 49ers signed last week. They announced it today as well. Both have been very good when it comes to when you look at their conversions of the receptions. So in 2019, Malik Turner had 15 total receptions. Of those 15, 11 of them went for either a first down or a touchdown. Last year, he had 12 receptions. And again, 11 of them went for either a first down or a touchdown. 8 of them were for a first down, and then the 3 that were touchdowns. So again, I don't think that Malik Turner is a cinch to make the roster. Neither with Marcus Johnson. But I think what the 49ers have done here is they've kind of been able to round out their wide receiver room. They now have 3 solid pro level wide receivers. Obviously, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk are your top 2. Juwan Jennings is your third. But then after that, you have a really good group that you can mix and match. And remember, the 49ers, probably the next guy or 2 up are going to have to play some special teams, which would mean maybe it's going to be a Malik Turner and Ray McLeod as your 5 receivers that are up, unless they decide to pull a 6th up. Which would be Johnson, because Johnson doesn't have the history on special teams. So it'll be interesting to see how they play that out. But I don't think that this is a situation where the 49ers also are out of the wide receiver market when it comes time to the draft. I feel that the 49ers do a really good job every year of trying to fill all of their needs during free agency, and then they pick and choose. It gives them the flexibility when it comes time for the draft to go out there and bring in the best player available at a position of need, the 49ers have a little bit of a need at wide receiver, especially, depending on what happens with this contract thing. But they do have a little bit of a need there for a guy, like I said, probably like around the 5 or around like a guy that would be like your number 4 receiver. So I don't know if I would see the 49ers going big like for Christian Watson, for example. I don't know if I'm going to see the 49ers going wide receiver at number 61. But keep an eye on that room. It's a pretty solid. Looks like a solid, pretty room right now. It'll be interesting to see how that one all plays out. So just taking a look really quick. Harold asks, how is the corner depth looking? I think the corner depth is pretty solid. You have when you get into the cornerback position with the 49ers, they have some good depth right now already at the cornerback position. Emmanuel Mosley and Travarius Ward likely to be your top 2. Ambry Thomas, Diamond Lenore are in that mix as well, probably as your, about second and thirds, but they're up there. You also have Dante Johnson, who is coming back, who they re-signed. I'd expect to be more of a slot corner. And then they have another cornerback, Holman, who they signed this year. But really, and Thomas and Ward and Mosley, that's a pretty good starting group. And then having, and Thomas, Ward, Mosley, that's a pretty good group right there. And then you go from that. And Lenore, I think what you're going to see is Lenore and Johnson and Denard. Those are going to be your 3 that are going to be looking early on at that slot cornerback position. The only spot that in the secondary is the slot corner. I think they're good on the outside. I'm a little nervous about their slot corner. That's where you have to look at a guy like Diamond or Lenore, right? He's shown the ability to be a good tackler. What was the role that they envisioned when they brought him in? I think that'll tell the story. We'll see a lot about that this year. And the one thing that I'm paying attention to also, outside of the cornerbacks is the situation. Well, actually, it does revolve around a cornerback a little bit. I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with Emmanuel Mosley and also with Jimmy Ward. Both those players are heading into the last year of their contracts. Both of them would look to be guys who, if you feel like they're going to be around long term, Jimmy Ward, give him a new deal, lower his cap hit a little bit. Same thing with Emmanuel Mosley. If you expect him, that you're going to build around him going into the future. I haven't seen either one of those yet, so it'll be something to keep an eye on there, especially with the Jimmy Ward piece, and that'll get really interesting around the draft if they could go safety as well. Brian asked a really good question that's off the topic, but we can wrap it up with this one. He says, Jack, the way teams used to practice compared now to, do you think it helps teams and players or hurt them overall? I think that this is one where I feel like, the lack of practice that teams have now, there's no longer 2-a-days. That's beneficial to an extent to the players. They're not getting banged around quite as much. I do think that you still need to have that physicality in practice, though, to help kind of build their bodies up to the wear and tear of what's going to be happening once you get into games. I do feel like the lack of time that they have hurts the teams when it comes to the offensive line, and maybe even a little bit of the defensive line when it comes to their development. When it comes, especially with the offensive line, they've got to be working, and there's only so much pass rush and running stuff that you can do without going full speed and without having all the gear on, because that's the one group we've seen throughout the NFL over the last few years, going back 5 to 10 years. We've definitely seen a drop off in play at the offensive line spots. And I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of reps that they're getting now compared to how it used to be in the past. So it helps teams in terms of keeping players healthy, but it's hurting in terms of some of the fundamentals of blocking and tackling because you're not seeing being able to really bring guys down to the ground. Um, so to not even be able to really tackle all that often, I think that's an issue as well. So they have drills obviously that they run to try to mimic those things, but it's just not the same as live action in practice. Uh, Gav asks, Jack, how much of an impact on special teams have we had in the offseason? How much do you see us improving in that department in 2020? Uh, I think that, when you look at the Foreigners, they were so bad the last 2 years on special teams in the return game and in the coverage game in particular. Uh, how much do we see them improving? I mean, they lost. I'm just thinking, Trenton Cannon wasn't, they replaced Trenton Cannon as far as in the return game with McLeod. So I think that's okay. Uh, the signing today is of uh, is a benefit for the 49ers because they've needed to have somebody in that role. They've needed to add some folks there. So when you go through their signings, Oren Burks and so on, that's those are coverage guys, right? So Oren Burks out there and the George Odom, especially George Odom, one time an All Pro with the Colts. So last year I think there was a couple of games that the 49ers might have been able to pull off if they had some better play in special teams and they weren't backed up so much. So let's see how this works out. But if it's not only the players too. They changed the coach as well. They were so bad they still have room to go down, but it's not too much that they can lose there. So. I would say if they can get if the guys that they've brought in Odom and so on, if they can come out and do what the 49ers expected to do, you're going to see an improvement. Even a guy like Malik Turner stepping into the coverage units would be helpful. He's replacing a guy who was in that role last year. As a wide receiver who was also a receiver, but also a big time special teams guy. So we're, in Trent Sherfield. So are the 49ers going to be able, how much better we'll see? Like I said, they brought in, they definitely targeted in free agency. They made those moves. So the 49ers are working towards that. Yeah. And McGlinchey, he definitely looks skinny, right? He definitely lost a lot of weight. That's what you kind of would expect a guy like Michael McGlinchey to lose weight. He hasn't been able to really do a whole lot over the last 7-8 months. So that's something to keep an eye on. Is how much is he able to put his body back together, and it's all part of what it takes for these guys. It's offensive linemen in particular. It's not natural for a lot of these guys to be carrying 300 pounds if they were even though they're big guys in terms of their size, 6'8", 6'5", what have you. It's still not normal to be carrying 300 plus pounds around all the time. So when they start to eat normal food and aren't overeating to build their bodies up, then you see this natural reduction in their size. And you saw that with Joe Staley. You see it with a number of guys. There was just off of the football tangent just for a minute, but it's still kind of on there. There was a guy that was on Survivor a few years ago. It's probably a while back now, Brad Culpepper, who used to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he was he was always a defensive lineman with the Buccaneers. And he was nearly, you wouldn't have known it if you just by looking at him that he was a defensive lineman in the NFL at one point because he was so much smaller. So it's just, when these guys are playing and they're in train mode and all those kind of things, they're putting a lot of calories into their body to keep that weight on. And when they're not able to do that, and like Gav says, they're rehabbing, may have lost some of the weight to make it easier, because that's what you've got to do. I don't know if it's necessarily losing weight to make it easier, but you're going to lose weight in general because piling on all those calories, you don't want to have that be just completely garbage either. You want to have that weight going in and be able to turn that into muscle. So um, usually the opposite. That's funny because he it's the opposite, right? It's the he says, don't wide receivers get fat when they retire too? That's the funny part, The offensive linemen, they can finally stop eating, and so they shrink down. And the wide receivers and the running backs and quarterbacks, they don't have to worry about running around anymore, so they start to bulk up. That's right. You see some of these guys later, and it's funny. They look a lot thicker than they did in their playing days. Look at Eric Bieniemy, for example, with the Kansas City Chiefs. When he was a running back, I know he was kind of a big back, uh, but now he looks like he'd be a Jerome Bettis if he was playing again. Just as one quick example, it comes right to the top of mind. So anyway, that's the show for tonight. Yes, real quick. Kim says Jerry Rice looks like he can still play. He does. Well, Jerry Rice is also golfing and dancing with the stars and doing 100-yard sprints across Levi Stadium before the starts of games. So yeah, Jerry Rice has kept himself in good shape, and he probably could go out and play. He'd probably be heck, if you had a flag football game and you wanted to get out there and get after it, Jerry Rice he'd work out really nice. Jig Wiley says, Jack, with Trey as our QB1, how will that affect Deebo's production going forward? Who do you envision as our number one receiver? Well, I think that you're still going to see, if Deebo Samuel's on the team, I think he's still going to be the number one guy. I could see Deebo Samuel still being the number one guy, but I think the guy that you're going to see his production take the biggest jump, who hasn't really been able to show it completely yet, is Brandon Ayuk, because you're going to be able to see some of those balls going downfield a little bit deeper. Trey Lance is more than capable of hitting those deep throws outside the numbers that we didn't see from Jimmy Garoppolo. So I would expect to see Brandon Ayuk's numbers take a jump. I would still think that Deebo's numbers are going to be up there as well. I just think you're going to see more completions to Ayuk down the field than what we've seen before. So that's my show for today. I want to say thank you to everybody that over in the comment section who took the time to make it a fun show and throw out a bunch of questions and keep me on my toes. I want to say thanks to everybody else that's watching that didn't comment, but you're here. So if you can do me a big favor, like it says at the top of the screen right up here, like and subscribe. That would be fantastic. Trying to continue to grow the channel and bring content to you on a daily basis. And then also get yourself over to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. Try to get a new article up on a daily basis. It's been I'm going to be working on some stuff here when this show ends for a new post over there. Probably keep an eye on that either to hit tonight, but there'll be at least one for sure tomorrow to check out. So take an eye up. Keep your eyes out. Tomorrow night, I will be back with Sobril Sunil for the 49ers Throwback Show, and we expect to have a pretty special guest on tomorrow night's show as well. So, again, thanks, everybody. If you could just hit that like button and subscribe, it'd be fantastic. Have a great rest of your Monday, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.